some things that you have to keep in mind, and it always has to start with your customer.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending which part of the world you're in, or even good evening. Thanks for joining us. It's a pleasure to be your moderator, and I have this distinct honor. I'm quite excited to have Alicia with us today, who's one of the most respected senior marketing professionals I know. So we're certainly looking forward to a fun interactive conversation with you all. I would suggest that I would encourage all of you to actually continue submitting questions in the QA through the QA function. I'll monitor that and I'll interweave those in my conversation with Alicia. Alicia certainly needs no introduction. She's has had such a fantastic career, senior leadership, certainly at Capitolis, the fintech company that Matt alluded to, but also leadership roles at SAP and Amex, and kind of going from big, massive Fortune 500 companies now to startups, to a startup being backed by some of the most well-known venture capitalists. So we have a lot to talk about. But Alicia, first and foremost, welcome. Thanks again for giving us your time.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. It's so good to be here. And thanks also to Matt for the introduction a moment ago as well.
Fantastic. Excellent. So let me set the stage, and then we're going to dive into these kind of multifaceted questions around marketing, some of the realities today and challenges when it comes to marketing, financial products in general and fintech products in particular. Now, over the past 10 or 20 years, as we all know, a lot has happened. On one hand, you have the kind of a collision of finance and technology. It's pretty much every domain that you can imagine. On the other hand, you have the fragmentation, not just of finance in general, but also of marketing tools and outreach in particular. Long gone are the days you could just market in print or television, you'll be good to go. But now you have so many channels, so how to stand out. And equally challenging is the fact that obviously finance is highly regulated, and also, very few things in finance have ever gone viral. So that heightens the importance of marketing. So given all these dynamics and the interplay between this, give us your take on the lay of the land today, and then we'll obviously get into more tactical considerations later on. But share with us the view of the world from your vantage point, and some of the marketing challenges, opportunities when it comes to finance and fintech products.
Absolutely, Robert. And so thank you, and hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be able to be with you today. Look, there's a tremendous amount that's happening in the marketplace today. And in my world, in fintech, but in any industry really, there are some things that you have to keep in mind, and it always has to start with your customer. What is your customer after? What problems are they trying to solve? What challenges create opportunities for them and their brands? And then it takes a fair bit of us as business leaders to sort of understand that at a very deep level, and then meet them where they need us to be. And meeting them is not just about the value of the products and services we offer. It certainly needs to be there, but it's also about the values that we possess as companies. And we've seen so much of this, Robert, in the past couple of years in particular. There has been so much change, so much challenge, so much that people have carried with them that they expect when they spend money or when they choose where they want to work or where their employment is going to be, values matter more than ever. And so as marketers, as business leaders, we have to be very, very thoughtful when we think about how we build our brands, how we position our value. Yes, we want to position our value in terms of what our products and services solve, but we also want to talk about the values we possess as companies that enable us to build those products and services. Do we have a diverse population? Antonio talked about this a bit in his session previous to this one. Do we have a diverse population? Are we thinking holistically about marketplace challenges and opportunities? And are we really listening to what customers want? And are we building a brand story, a brand strategy, products and services that are going to be exactly what our customers are after, so that we can not only acquire them as customers, but we can create customers for life as well. And so those are some of the fundamentals, I would say, Robert, that the past 2 years have brought into business that as leaders, we have to be very, very quick to be able to respond to.
Now, certainly, once you're a bit large company, the thinking goes, well, huge budgets, much easier to accomplish all these goals that you set out for us. But obviously, if we're a startup, fewer, resources, so maybe we should just give up. But based on my interaction with you, I feel like you have a different take on that, and you don't necessarily see lack of resources as a challenge, insurmountable challenge. So give us some tactical tools and and also strategies. How do you crack the code on ensuring that you can communicate the right message and you're customer centric and you listen to them and you have this dialogue without having a huge team or budgets behind you?
Well, I'll answer that question in terms of my real life experience professionally. So I've spent the first half of my career at two very, very large companies, American Express and SAP. And I ran global marketing for the travel services division at Amex, and I ran global marketing for all of SAP. And if you can imagine, I had a lot of people and I had a pretty significant operating budget. And we did well. We did well as brands. My roles in both of those companies was to transform legacy brands so that they remained relevant against the backdrop of the marketplace conditions that we had been operating in. In November of last year, I decided to do a career change in the sense where I made a decision to go to a brand that no one has yet ever heard of, unlike American Express and SAP. And I joined a business where I had 0 full-time employees and money was spent in marketing, but we didn't have a clear understanding of how much money that was. But I can tell you, it was a mere fraction of what I was spending at SAP and American Express. But I moved into this role because I believed that it wasn't about the spend and the amount of people that we needed to truly build a category and transform an industry. So I will go out on a limb here and say, you don't need $1 billion or even a multi-million-dollar budget to build a brand. Right now, my team consists of 1.5 employees. I have 1 person on my team, and I have also a full-time contractor. And between the 3 of us, the progress that we have made in a mere 5 months has been extraordinary. And I'll tell you what we've done. We first started out by really understanding our market. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? What do customers need? And in my space, our customers are the largest global financial institutions in the world. And they're also all of your institutional investors around the world as well. And so we worked hard to really understand where the opportunities were against what we have to offer. And then it starts, Robert, with the story. What's that story? What's that compelling story of value, that compelling story of differentiation? And alongside of that being incredibly important, how do you tell it in a way that anybody can understand using real language, not all the language that we often get caught up in corporate life, but how do we tell a really compelling story? And then how do we utilize all of the channels that we have in the toolkit of marketing, social media, public relations, media relations? How do we stand up some events, small events, intimate events where we just come together and talk about what's going on and what challenges we want to collaborate to solve for? And that's where we've started. And we've already begun to put the brand on the map by just turning up the volume on some channels, like social media, that frankly don't cost a lot of money to be able to have your own company page on Instagram or Twitter or LinkedIn, to name a few of the channels. But know your story, know the challenges that you're helping your customers solve, and just get out there and start telling it, and use the employees of your business on their social channels to tell the story as well, and see how that begins to multiply when you start to take advantage of their networks as well. And this isn't big budget marketing. This is about just really understanding your purpose, your value, what you're working with your customers on, and then using your own networks to be able to spread the word on what it is that you're there to build. And that's where we're starting. And it doesn't cost millions of dollars. And that's what we have to keep in mind as we build the brands of our businesses.
I really appreciate you saying that on multiple levels. Well, you know, part of my work at Columbia is, you know, my research and teaching, both at Columbia Business School and Engineering, is around product development, product design, and also, you know, tackling the issue of what solution we are providing for the customer from a technical perspective. But exactly everything you said is also along the lines of how, you know, product comes to be from a marketing side versus technical. So the question I wanted to pose to you, especially working at a much smaller firm, is that to what extent do you advocate for, and do you work with the engineering team and the product development team so the message goes hand in hand with the product development, and vice versa, i.e. the engineers will respond to market needs and create a product that speaks to all the amazing things you talked about, mission, value, and so on?
It really matters. You know, think of what trust means. And if you think of the word trust and how you really need to manage and build trusted relationships with your customers, how you show up, how you appear, how you sound, it has to be consistent across every interaction that your customer has with you. And that's from how you interact on social media, to advertising, to their interaction with your products and services. All of that has to be consistent, because as we all know as humans, any inconsistency we have in life really breaks down an ability for someone to be able to trust you. And that's no different when it comes to building a company and building a brand. And so my relationship and my team's relationship with what we call our Capital Labs team, which is where a lot of the new ideas around products and services begin, to then our engineering, product management, and then our go-to-market and customer success teams. We have a highly integrated relationship across the business. And I can't stress that enough to everyone about the need to really first and foremost understand what all of those groups are being held accountable for, and how they're going about delivering that. And then what is the place for your responsibilities in helping them? It is about this mutual empathy, something that I've always led tremendously with when it comes to especially collaborating across the various functions in a company, is this understanding that you have across all of the groups to be able to help and support one another. And most importantly, create a really sound integration so that when the company is felt by the customer, they feel nothing but absolute consistency across each function. They see, if we take marketing as an example, the way we're building a story, the visual identity of the brand has to exist within our products and services as well. Our customer success relationship managers, how they message our brand and how they speak about our values. All of these things are just tremendously important when it comes to driving consistency and then building the ultimate trust that our customers expect from us.
And indeed, especially after 2008 crisis, and afterwards, trust in financial services companies has kind of been on a sliding scale, so to speak. So certainly establishing that trust the way you put forth, I believe, is incredibly valuable in ensuring consistent messaging and that the product can deliver what the marketing says it would, and vice versa. But along those lines, you alluded to social media being such low cost way to reach customers. Obviously, the cost is minimal for everybody. So it's also easy for the pretenders or not so good actors also to have the same megaphone, so to speak. So how do you ensure you stand out from the noise, given the fact that cost for being on social media is low for everybody?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple of things, and I'll go back to something that I shared a few moments ago. Standing out really has to do with, I think, the quality of your story, and not to underestimate the style and the tone, how it looks, how it's packaged as well. You want something that's going to stand out. So, the colors you choose, the tone of voice you choose, the photography that you use in your marketing. I think those things are really important. The most important, though, are the words that you choose, how you think about describing your value, and how you tell that in a way that truly resonates with the audience that you're looking to attract yourself to. The other thing that I would say is, Capitolis is in an industry that is absolutely ripe for disruption. And that was part of the reason why I wanted to make such a bold move into this space. I mean, capital markets, as we know, and you had said a few moments ago, capital markets highly regulated, and how you navigate that as a marketer is equally important as how you navigate that as a business leader. So, the beautiful thing about regulation, which, really began to really ramp up post the financial crisis in 2008, the regulation is intended to keep the capital markets safe, transparent, healthy, because this is an industry that, although many may not understand all the ins and outs and what the impact of it is, we certainly felt it during the 2008 crisis. And the regulation intends to help prevent that from ever happening again. And if we think about so many of the challenges that we've lived through since 2008, and by and large, we've not had a crisis to the magnitude that we've had since then. And that is a large part in thanks to the regulation. But it's also an opportunity to bring necessary innovation to an industry that hasn't had a tremendous amount of technology in it to help really innovate and transform a lot of the aspects of the markets. And so I say that and tell you that part because when it comes to standing out, if you're in an industry, and I do believe every industry is ripe for disruption at any point in time, even if it feels as though it's constantly evolving, it often does demand, though, those standout players who are really taking significant responsible risks, but risks to do something different. Because I do believe that any customer who has money to spend, they want to put it with a partner who is going to truly help them transform and bring their business to the next level. And so you have to think about that as a marketer when you tell your story. You're not telling a story of kind of table stakes, what's expected. You're telling a story of true transformation and how what you have to offer can really help enable that transformation. And so that's what we think about here at Capitolis, which is, and that's the most invigorating part and exciting part as a leader, as an employee, is how do you think bold? How do you be audacious? How do you think totally different from anything that's ever been done before? And to me, having your brand stand out without a lot of money takes boldness of thought, of use of words, of how you describe your value, of things that you want to go after that perhaps companies or leaders before you haven't had the courage to do. I do believe that every company that's being founded, every entrepreneur, they have those thoughts. They have those audacious thoughts of change. And I think as marketers, we have the beautiful responsibility of bringing that message to market in creative ways that's going to make it stand out.
Well, there's so many follow-up questions to all the things you talked about. So let's go over. Let's do a kind of a rapid fire round. So I want to make sure I can incorporate as many of the audience questions as well as my own questions. So on this notion of storytelling and telling it the right way, and also genuinely, not just for the sake of getting a bad product out in the world, to what extent do you believe that these stories could be global versus hyper-local? Meaning that, long gone are the days when innovation in fintech is, someone coming from another country to developed country and copy what we have back home, and then they call it innovation. Now is innovation happening everywhere locally. We ourselves can learn a lot from other innovation being done in Africa, Asia, and so on. So that begets the question, can you truly develop a global story, or do you need to be hyper-local and talk to the customer based on local customs, habits, realities, and so on?
Look, I don't think we can survive as businesses if we don't truly understand the local needs and nuances that our customers require. I think that a lot of companies aspire to go global, but global is really a sum of all of our parts, really, with so many nuances that exist along the way in terms of, cultural differences that require a different customization from a product standpoint, to the stage of the journey your business is in or the segment in which you're operating. It requires different levels of service and different needs from a product capability perspective. And I think that if we want to believe, if any company wants to believe that or stand behind being global, that means you have mastered in ways the local expectations necessary to be able to operate in the US, to be able to operate in Europe, and then all of those countries that exist around and in between that have differences in terms of what they need to be able to operate. And so I think, sure, in our business, we service, some of the largest global institutions in the world, and they have a set of requirements, but we also service customers at a regional and a local level. And they have different needs, some common, but there's some differences that exist as well. And we have a responsibility for understanding that also. And so I think there is a difference, but I think there is a need for us to truly understand locally what's necessary if we want to be able to win customers at both a local and a global level.
Interesting, in both regard to the kind of messaging and this reality that you laid out for us. Mm-hmm. Now, slightly tangential, but related to this topic that's close to my heart, also a question from the audience in regard to, as we're talking about innovation, obviously one of the biggest innovation in finance and fintech that we're all looking very closely at is development of crypto and blockchain-based solutions. And this ideal that perhaps we could use those tools to address some of the challenges for the underbanked and the unbanked in the BIPOC communities and so on. Obviously, as I'm sure you know, there's a ton of marketing around these products, some of which are questionable, some perhaps not. Hard to judge, obviously, in such a in such setting. But whenever it comes to so brand new type innovation and products, how do you ensure that the market even understands what it is that you're trying to do? I mean, this kind of applies to your role anyway, because Capitolis is truly innovative companies. They really have to stand out and deliver a message on not only what you do, but why you're different, why you're better. So how do you reconcile and marry those two when you're dealing with such brand new innovation?
Look, the reality is people, as humans, we are wired to have a strong infatuation with things that are new on the market. So you think of crypto and blockchain, it's fascinating, it's new. People are running towards it. It reminds me when artificial intelligence and machine learning were first introduced into the market as well, and we saw the same type of reaction and behavior. But one of the things that I think we can all recognize is people run fast, but they don't necessarily understand what they're running towards and how, in fact, they need to use and apply it either personally or in their businesses. And I think when it comes to crypto and blockchain, similar to that of machine learning and artificial intelligence, I think as companies, as business leaders, we first and foremost have a responsibility to educate. What is this? What does it mean? What is the value? Where does it fit? Does it replace something? Does it sit alongside of something? Does it create an opportunity that's going to enable us to solve a challenge, to create a new opportunity? And so I think that's where we always have to start. And so the education oftentimes has to play catch up. And as marketers, I think our role is to help support the understanding of that. So I think being part of events, industry events in particular, where new topics to help improve your business or think about your business differently are ways in which we can help support the education of these new things that are coming into play. At the same time, I think as innovators in our businesses, and I was part of SAP when machine learning and artificial intelligence, really began to come into market. We began to sit down and work with our customers individually to help them understand, number one, what this is, and number two, where does it fit in your overall business strategy? What does it mean you have to change? And how can we as your partner help you navigate through this and use it to your advantage in creating the opportunities that it's intended to do? And so it's very consultative. And that's the business, that I'm in now. When we think about one of the greatest differentiators that we offer as a brand is we are highly collaborative with our customers. When you work in capital markets, it's high stakes, you're dealing with lots and lots of money. The challenges and the opportunities that the banks are managing through today, there is no room for error, period. And so in order to make sure that we get it right the first time, the collaboration, that consultative relationship is absolutely key. But I can argue that for every single industry, one of the greatest ways to stand out is to collaborate from the onset with your customer, truly understand what it means to be customer first. And that means sitting with them in the trenches day by day, incubating, understanding how to build, what to deliver, and what's going to bring the most value. And I think that that's a true differentiator that any company of any size, especially a startup company, can have, is really getting there deep with the customer to build something that's going to be really meaningful to them.
And indeed create that kind of emotional connection and view marketing not just from a product perspective, from a multitude perspective. Let me combine two audience questions into one. And this is about understanding that building trust, as you alluded to earlier, is about the consistency of delivery of the message, of the product, of the solution you're providing, but also building that emotional connection. The first part, it's easier. But the second part is certainly much harder. So can you talk about how do you develop this emotional connection, perhaps through the context of your own work or kind of a macro experience? But related to this, I want to add an interesting filter from, again, another audience question that I hadn't thought much about before, and that is, how do you create an emotional connection if you're a regulator? We always think of marketing purely from a company perspective, but what if you're a regulator, you're trying to let the world know, hey, you're doing good work, you're protecting consumers, you're out there looking for your best interest, but the view in general around marketing, of regulatory services is perhaps not as well known. How do you create emotional connection to those two contexts?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because, when people think of regulation, it's often seen as barriers to being able to do things efficiently. It creates unnecessary complexity, challenges. And so the general view of regulation is that it's bad and it's difficult to navigate through. And how am I still going to do my business, with increased regulation that is being stood up around me all the way? You have to take a different perspective of it. And that's most things in life, especially when it comes to building emotional connections. It's the beauty of the human language. It's the beauty of how we're wired as humans, that there are always multiple ways to look at a situation. I've always had the perspective on life that you really need to kind of open your eyes to a variety of things to be able to see what the intentions are and how you're going to get through it. Regulations are here to keep us safe, period. While it may seem complex to navigate through it, you, number one, have to start with the understanding. It's there to keep us safe. Number two, what are the regulations? How do we understand them? And then how do we still run our business now within the guardrails of the regulation? And that's one of the things that we do at Capitolis. We help you kind of demystify what that means and how you operate within the system and do it fair and do it responsibly and transparently. Creating this emotional connection, I think, goes hand in hand with all of those things. I mentioned this word empathy before. I think the best way to create emotional connection with regulators, with customers, with any of the constituents in your ecosystem, it starts with an understanding of them and what they're trying to solve. It's a lot of listening out of the gate. And I will tell you, as a leader, any new role, new project, new relationship that I'm beginning in life always has started with listening. Sure, I have 25 years experience in marketing and I've been around the block and I know a thing or two, but I treat every interaction I have as a learning. No matter how much I think I already know, I walk away from every interaction learning something new. And it's because I went in with that mindset. I went in saying, I'm going to learn something here, and I'm going to listen and I'm going to be open. And in doing so, Robert, I will tell you, that's when the connection with the person you're interacting with begins. When you understand them and you give them a space to listen, that connection happens. And then you work to then create meaningful things between each other. And I say this as a business leader to anyone that's here on the line that runs a business, is part of business in some way. Really building that emotional connection matters today in business more than ever. People do not just buy products and services. They buy values, they buy emotion, they buy heart, they buy soul. That is a necessary offering that customers must have. And it's up to us as humans to make that connection and make that feel like a reality in terms of the partnership you'll gain with the business that you're offering to that person in return.
Most of what you have, most, if not all, the framework you set out for us kind of is predicated on the messaging, starting with the company, going to the community, to the customer. And perhaps in an ideal scenario, you have customers creating community around your product and service and interact with the company. Now, with the emergence of Web 3.0 solutions and perhaps decentralized communities, all of a sudden, the scary part is that you might lose control of the message. The message is in the hand of the customers, who could be a great thing, but if the message goes out of hand, all of a sudden, you're not in control of anything. How do you reconcile the potential benefits of creating community around your product and let consumer engage with it without losing actual ownership of the message and the product? Do you think those two goals could be achieved simultaneously?
I do. And look, if somebody cares enough to be out there talking about my product or service, then to me, that's a win. Even if it's not necessarily the message that I want, at least they care enough to be talking about us publicly. And if it's a negative, I get to see that. And we have an opportunity as a business to respond to that. And that's a beautiful thing. I always worry about the people that don't say anything at all, because I think that often speaks to, there being a lack of passion or care of what you're building. But, whether it's negative or positive, if people are talking about it, then they care. And look, when we came into this world of social media well over a decade ago, there was a lot of concern about, from a business perspective, do we jump into social media as a business? I'm sure, many of us who were around, 15, 20 years ago when this started to become a thing, we remember those boardroom conversations about whether or not we have a company page or if the company should be out there commenting on posts from customers or prospective customers. It was a big concern. And a lot of it was because, wow, what happens if somebody goes out there and says something negative about your product or service. And now fast forward to where we are today. And I welcome all of it. And I think many businesses do, because you want people who care and you want to be able to go out there and react and have a chance to fix things. And so I do think, these platforms are very valuable to us. I think as long as, so much, Robert, of what we talked about in the first half of the conversation about, let's understand the problems we're solving for, let's build a really compelling story around that. And then let's just make sure that beyond the story, our products and services are always working, they're always evolving. We're constantly challenging the status quo around what we can do. We're ever evolving our value. And look, if there's a strong commitment to that and we're executing well and we're communicating effectively, then we should never be concerned about what anyone is out there talking about, because we'll know that we brought our authentic self time and time again. And look, if something breaks down, every once in a while, and we know that that's going to be inevitable in life, then we want people out there, talking about it and giving us a chance to fix it and react to it. And to me, it's this kind of have no fear attitude, as long as you are, being consistent, being thoughtful, being very focused on your customer and bringing the necessary innovation at a product level, then I think success follows from that.
Well, Alicia, I only have about 3,000 or 4,000 questions to ask you, but since time is up, I'm going to ask one final quick one. What should be on our radar in the 1 minute we have remaining? What should be on our radar in terms of what's on horizon, what we should pay attention to in the domain that you're talking about? And number two, this is an optional question, you don't have to answer it. What company do you think embodies everything you talked about in financial services today that you admire, both in terms of product, in terms of marketing, and so on? Again, optional. I know I'm putting you on the spot, and this is obviously aside from Capitolis.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, obviously, Capitolis will always be my first answer. I think what's always on the horizon is what the next technology is going to be. I would say I think technology is the foundation enabling change at every level in the world. And the question is, what's next? And I think my ask of all of you on the line today is what are you going to lead next? There are so many things to be solved for in this world at an economic, societal, environmental level. So many of you out there today, I know, are already tackling those challenges, but there's so much more that can be done. Is it technology? Is it something we yet to know? I don't know. But I would challenge all of you to just take all that inspiration that you've been brought on this planet to give and put it towards what's really going to be necessary to change, because we can do it. If we're a little crazy and we believe we can, that's when the best ideas come to fruition. So that's what I would say is it's going to be something. And I put my bets on somebody on the line today being the one who's going to make that happen. In terms of companies I admire, look, I've worked, I'm in capital markets now, financial services and technology. I admire a lot of the greats that, have charted the course for us at a big company level. I think companies like an SAP or an Apple or a Microsoft or an Amazon, these are real disruptors of industries, but they are not untouchable. And, I think as entrepreneurs, as small business leaders, there is an incredible opportunity to continue to disrupt. And I think, Robert, when we talked before about, the difference between local and global, I think that the best companies are those who really understand their customer the most. And that is certainly at a local level. It's what are they trying to solve and how can you help them get there? I do think a lot of these big companies can be outseated by the very entrepreneurs that are out there trying to think about how they're going to disrupt the industries that they feel are ripe for disruption. And so I think go at it. go at it, trying to come up with that idea and be the next, top 10 brand on the planet, because I think anybody has the opportunity to be able to achieve that.
Well, thank you so much, Alicia, for your time. Much appreciated. Matt, thank you again for the opportunity for the two of us to engage in such a conversation. This certainly, begets many other conversations to follow, but hopefully soon. So thank you, Matt. Thank you, Alicia. That's all from me.